things underway. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here with our first live webinar short. A concept that we're trying to get as much information across Sweden as possible using our fantastic resources. And we have none other than our head coach, Jonty Rhodes, tonight talking us through training in the off season. So I'm going to waste no time and bring him in here and send live. And if anyone has any questions during the meeting, please post them in the meeting chat. If we have time, we'll get through to them. If not, we'll try our best to answer them as they come in. But we've got 30 minutes, so please enjoy our first webinar short. Jonty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ben. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I love the way that Ben introduces me, webinar short. I have been vertically challenged for most of my cricketing career as a cricket player and as a coach. But fortunately, from a fielding perspective, being vertically challenged was a lot easier to dive around the field. So yes, thank you, Ben, for the webinar short. It is much appreciated. Now, it's quite difficult for me, I must say, to look at a screen and just Ben, as opposed to everybody else who has joined this webinar. So please forgive me if I start wandering off and Ben has to kind of, I don't know, online tap me on the shoulder and say, Jonty, stay on course, because we do have half an hour. Training in the off season is a huge topic to cover. I mean, it really is. And I think what is important is that this is my first, literally second month in Sweden. And even though Ben and I have been discussing a great deal about the pathway and the Ungdoms League, the different scenarios we want to set up and where we would like to see Swedish cricket grow to, this is the first time that I've actually had, other than with the board members, contact with some of the most important people in Swedish cricket. Yes, you heard me correctly. The most important people in Swedish cricket are you. And it's because you are the future of Swedish cricket. And I say this with honesty and sincerity, in that I really believe that I'm not here as a consultant, firstly. I have relocated with my family to Sweden. It's a long-term plan for us. We are getting into the culture and the weather very slowly. I've only just received my person number after a month. My family's still waiting for theirs, so it's in the system, hopefully. But we are here for a long time. And I think what is so important, what Ben and I and the Office of the Swedish Cricket Federation, with the support of the board, what we want to ensure is that the young cricket players in Sweden have an opportunity to take the next step, take it to the next level. Because without a sort of a pathway, where do you go from here? And what's the point of them training in the off season or working hard in season? Because it's very difficult for young players to break into a scenario that's been dominated by the same names year in and year out, because there is no pathway to the national team. So what we want to try and set up is ensure that you have access and direction how to find this pathway firstly, and how do you go from where you are to your end goals, which is hopefully playing cricket for the Swedish national team. And I think a part of what I've done over the last since September, five months with Ben, is just come from a very neutral standpoint where, I have worked in the IPL, the Indian Premier League, since 2009 for 9 seasons with Mumbai Indians. And then I had a 2-year sabbatical where I did a lot of work in countries with limited cricketing facilities, limited cricket budgets, but no shortage of cricket passion. And I think the same applies here in Sweden. So I think what we have here that is exciting for me is that we have an opportunity to build a cricket culture in Sweden that's never been seen before. So Ben is new in his job as a director of operations. I am new in my job as the national coach, but I'm not just here to coach the national team. Hopefully the expertise that I have on and off the field is something that I can then add to your skills going forward here. So I think what is the most important thing for me is that there's so much uncertainty, and 2021 has come and gone, and we're still in a scenario where we don't actually know what is going to happen next month. it's very frustrating. So Ben has worked hard for the last 8 months trying to prepare a plan to get us all playing cricket, to get us all access in various regions, to concentrate that and then feed young talent like yourselves into the national setup where I can get the opportunity to work with yourselves, the players and the coaches, which for me has been a really important part of what I've been doing for the last 2 years away from the IPL, is working with the local coaches. Because if I come in for a 10-day camp or a 1-week camp, it's great fun, everyone gets excited. But when you leave 10 days later or 2 weeks later, if you're not doing the same thing again, cricket is a game of habit. I've wasted my time. So I'm really looking forward to the long run. I am really looking forward to making sure that you prepare for the season with purpose. Okay, and we talk about how can we take action now. It's the off season, but there are limitations. There's restrictions on how we can get together, how can we train. But don't let that be an excuse, because I think from a cricketing point of view, as a cricket player during my cricketing career, there were so many things that you have no control of. And whether you're a cricket player or work in a corporate or a business environment, you can't always determine the situation you'll find yourself in, but you can always determine your actions and your attitude to that situation. Okay, so right now you could be locked down, not being able to, or have no access to cricket facilities or to a team to be able to practice. That is no excuse. Okay, there's lots of things that we can do as cricket players without necessarily having to hit bat on ball, without necessarily having to have a team bowling to us or batting against us in the nets. Okay, so I really think what is a fundamental skill is such an important part for us to just start with, because if we start with the basics, you know, I think if you're cricket fans and you watch tournaments like the PSL, the IPL, the CPL, these fantastic cricket players all around the world, and you see the likes of A.B. de Villiers, you see the likes of Virat Kohli or KL Rahul or Kieron Pollard, you know, and Babar Azam. You see these great batters who some have incredible power like a Kieron Pollard, some have incredible technique, and some like A.B. de Villiers, you don't know how they do half the stuff that they do. But I think what is really, really important, so whether you're batting or whether you're bowling or whether you're fielding, the basics, your foundation is so important. And why I've asked Ben to illustrate these shots is that the top left picture of Virat Kohli, if you're looking at that, that's just a forward defensive push. Virat Kohli is defending the ball down the ground. The next slide, when he's batting in the RCB, and I think it looks like Chris Gayle on the other side, that ball is going for 6, believe it or not. The one down the middle, it's a cover drive. So if you look at all of those, his forward defensive push, his cover drive for 4, and his shot over lofted cover for 6, or over mid-off for 6. It's pretty much the same foundation. It's the same shape. And that's what I really want to get across to all the young players, especially the batters in this scenario, is that you don't have to be a Chris Gayle to hit the ball out the ground. You don't have to be an MS Dhoni, who has lots of obviously muscle power on his side. Someone like a Virat Kohli who utilizes the fact that he understands that power comes from the ground up. So it's really, really important that all of us understand that right from the beginning. And I'm about to be invaded by my family. 1 second. I'm online, right? India. I don't know what's happened. I really don't know what's happened. Okay, I'm going back to work. Okay, I can't even be angry with them because I'm live. That's wonderful. So yes, they don't. They obviously haven't. They're not expecting me to be working much in snowing outside here in Sigtuna, wherever you are in Sweden. I'm sure it's pretty cold too. But it's been a scenario where, you know, I've watched Virat Kohli. I've never actually worked with him, but he's been a great study for me if I'm trying to focus with young players. And often I'll go to a cricket practice and I'll stand in the net and I'll drop the ball, 1 bounce, 2 bounce, hit, top hand and bottom hand. Because if you look at his bottom hand, too often we are told as a batter that, oh, you can't use the bottom hand. Too much bottom hand is bad for you. It's only bad for you if they work opposite directions. So Virat Kohli has a very strong bottom hand technique. And if you see him whip the ball from off stump through to the leg side, you actually wonder, how does this guy not get out LBW or bowled more often? So yes, he has great hand-eye coordination, but I tell you what, this guy, one of the best players in the world, he practices really, really hard. And if you look at his technique, he's forcing himself, because he wants to hit the ball through the offside, he's forcing his hands to go along the same line as the ball. And that for me is fantastic illustration of someone who is in complete control of the basics. Because what that allows him to do, everyone, what that allows him to do is to pick the correct shot for each delivery. Because shot selection is what separates a Virat Kohli from the rest of us at an international level. Because all of us work as hard. He's not more talented than anybody else. He's not, look at this guy, AB de Villiers. I mean, he plays some ridiculous shots. So yes, maybe he's a little bit freakish, the reverse sweep for 6 of the fast bowlers. But he is a player that, again, he backs himself from a base point of view. If you watch his technique, if you watch where he stands in the crease, you watch how low he gets, but how still he stands before he hits the ball or before he decides to step down. Okay, so my example of Virat Kohli and AB de Villiers, sure, 2 of the best players in the world, and it might be going, oh, well, Jonty, how can you expect us to emulate these guys? What they do really, really well is they do the basics fantastically, whether it's a forward defense, a cover drive, or a lofted drive for 6. It's the same shape. Forward defense, cover drive, lofted drive for 6. It's the same shape. If you don't believe me, go Google those 2 on YouTube and watch their cover drives, watch their forward defense, and watch the straight drive for 6. I'm telling you, same shape. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that shot selection. In the game, AB de Villiers, because he's Mr. 360, maybe he takes a bit more risk than Virat Kohli. Virat Kohli hardly plays the sweep or the reverse sweep. In the game, he backs himself that with his wrist work and with his timing, Virat Kohli, he can hit the ball anywhere in the ground or in his strength areas and then also minimizes the risk, which is why Kohli is such an incredible asset to his team when he's chasing down a target. He's a great finisher because it's very difficult to get him out because his shot selection is superb. Okay, so that's something that we can think about and practice in the off season. All right, so whether you're a batter, I've given 2 examples of 2 great batters, but whether you're batting or bowling, and even if you're catching a soft ball inside the house or having your sister or brother throw the ball to you in certain things, are you practicing with a purpose? Okay, so what are you trying to achieve from your training? Is it, I have a father who's a headmaster and a school principal who was also a sports coach, and he was always getting down to me with regards to what are you going to achieve from training? Because he used to coach the under-9 cricket team. So he would often say, Jonty, Teepers, look at these kids. They've been here for 2 hours, but have actually achieved nothing. So how are you monitoring or measuring your progression? How are you? I'm not going to sit here and tell you what to do. You should be able to hit 100 cover drives flawlessly. Half volley, half volley, half volley. Before you start thinking about the sweep, the reverse sweep, the lofted drive. If you can hit a half volley 100% of the times in the right directions, that is something you want to monitor and measure. Because that's then the next step to the lofted drive for 6, minimizing your risk. Okay, so things like that. What tools do you use for feedback? Is it just your mates who you practice with saying, wow, great shot? What is it? There are many, many tools available now, from online, recording yourself, having your friend record you while you're practicing, having someone at home. We used to do it in my younger days, a long, long time ago, before mobile phones were around, forward defenses in front of the mirror. So we'd have to check our back leg, our elbow, and just see everything was working. And we did that because it gave us the fundamentals, the correct fundamentals. Okay, so really, really important. What tools are you using for feedback? Are you taking videos? Are you asking your friends? Do you have coaches that you can access? All these sort of things. Don't just practice because you're spending time where you can kind of tick it off. Yes, I practiced 4 hours this week, so I'm looking good. Cricket is a game of habit. They're good habits and they're bad habits. Hopefully none of you will know, if you've ever been a smoker and you try and give up smoking, it's a really tough habit to break. Okay, so habits are very difficult to form and to break. So when you're practicing cricket, it really is just a game of habit. So can you imagine facing someone like a Bumrah, who's bowling at 145 kilometers an hour with a slightly awkward action? He rushes onto you. Your brain, and they've measured it scientifically, your brain doesn't have time, and maybe there's something Ben with his, his Olympic background from a science point of view and physiology. If your brain doesn't have your time to tell your body, oh, it's a half volley, hit it. You have to see it and react instinctively. And how do you react instinctively? You train your brain to tell your body to do it without your brain having to go through that whole process. Because at 145 kilometers an hour, you don't even have a second to react, less than a second. Okay, so it's not about, oh, this guy's got better reactions, or you just practice good habits. And like I said, that comes from whether you're batting or you're bowling, and especially if you're fielding, because I've seen it a lot in my fielding coach days, where we practice we play at the IPL. It's in April and May and early June sometimes, in the hottest months of the year in India. Just before monsoon, it is boiling hot, and the players are practicing for 3 hours. Now I've got to ask them to come do some fielding. So I don't drag the whole team for fielding practice. I'll grab 2 or 3 players at a time and take them for 5 to 7 minutes, because I know that they are exhausted from their practice sessions. But if they practice for longer than 10 minutes after their sort of 2 hours of practicing, they're going to get lazy, and one, I can break a finger and it starts looking like mine that goes around corners, or they practice bad habits. So I'll give them high intensity for 5 or 7 minutes. When they're doing something that's correct, we move on to the next drill. We get it correct, we move on. So when you're practicing perfectly, that is the difference. Okay, so really, really important. Ben, is there another one about practice, perfect practice? What other slide did I have there? Oh, the last one. Okay, I'm not going to rush it because, okay, and amazing. I mean, this is obviously in a game, it's not a practice, but perfect practice makes perfect. I mean, that was my father. And I'm really grateful for the fact I'm one of 3 boys. I grew up in a small town in South Africa, but went to an all-boys school where my father was the principal, and he's also a sports master. But from an early age, he just said to me, Jonty, you're going to have coaches, you're going to have teachers, because it applies to every walk of life. It's not just sport. It's whether it's in your exams and your studies at school, whether if you play musical instruments, whatever you are involved in. He just said, Jonty, if you hear your teacher say, practice makes perfect, then I hate to tell you, that's only half the story. Because going back to my story or my scenario about how you practice in cricket as a game of habits, if you're not practicing like you're in a match situation, how do you ever raise or take on the intensity that comes with a game? Because when you're in the net, you can stand, you can hit the ball, and you're nice and relaxed. But come to the game where you know you've only got one opportunity as a batter, or if you're bowling, this over could cost the team the game. Suddenly you're under pressure and your body seizes up. So your technique, you lose it because you're slightly restricted and you don't flow nicely, whether it's bowling, good release, or hitting the ball through the line because you're nervous. Okay, anxiety, adrenaline, fear and adrenaline is a very fine line. If you can harness your fear, that's adrenaline. It makes you better, it makes you faster. If you can't harness that fear, it inhibits you. Okay, so the only way you can harness that anxiety about getting out or making a mess in the game is practicing like you are in a game situation. And as a coach, I can't tell if you're giving me 100%. I can't. You'll hear players saying, oh, they must practice, how are you going to be successful? Practice 120%. You can't tell me you can practice. You can only practice up to 100%. But I, as a coach, can't tell whether you are giving me 100%. Only you can honestly know if you are practicing at 100%. And that is the key now for me. This is the pathway to a better Swedish Cricket Federation, a better Swedish national team. You are the future of this country's cricket. And you have this opportunity now to set that example, to set that standard and the legacy, not in the way that you perform on the field, but how did you perform at practice? Because that is where a team is formed. A team is not formed when you're winning and games are going well and high fives. That's not how a happy team or a winning team is formed. because anybody can slap each other on the back and give each other high fives when they're winning. Okay, it's when you're practicing hard together. It's when you're practicing the basics together, practicing those fundamentals. That's where a happy team and a strong team is formed, and that's where you become eventually a winning team. So you have this opportunity, and hopefully with Ben, myself, with the board, Swedish Cricket Federation, what we have is a limited budget. What we have is limited facilities. What we have is limited cricket season, because it rains and snows for 6, 7 months, 8 months of the year. But as I said before, you can't determine every single time the circumstances you find yourself in, but you can determine your action and reaction to those circumstances. So here's a great opportunity, a fantastic opportunity with a completely clean slate for you to set the standard of what you want to dream to play for Sweden. How do you want the Swedish team to play cricket in the future? And that, everybody, rests on you, whether you're a coach or whether you're a player, and that should excite you, because we have a great opportunity to lay a foundation for a fantastic generation of cricket players to come through Swedish Cricket Federation. Okay, so what I'm asking for, Ben, just before we cut off here, is for the players to take ownership. Don't wait for the coach to tell you to practice. Don't wait for anybody else. You have to take ownership. Treat cricket, that's your office, whether you're practicing or playing. Take ownership of how you prepare. Take ownership of how you behave at the game, at practice, to the umpires, to the opposition players. You take ownership of all of that, because that's what makes a cricket player. Not just the stats, not just the runs or the wickets or the performances. It's how you as an individual behave with the people around you. And you can set that sort of standard.
Awesome, Jonty. We've had a few questions rolling in here that that might be helpful to address before we wrap up. One of them is, what have been your first impressions of Swedish cricket as an associate nation? Do you see any similarities with other places that you've worked for? And the reason why they ask is because it gives youngsters the vision and inspiration that they can as well.
I think from my perspective, my first intro to Swedish cricket has been very similar to what I've seen in places like Malawi. So it's a little bit frustrating, because you have a rather disjointed, you have people doing some good stuff but in isolation, and whenever the entire body gets together, they actually can't agree on anything. So this is what we are working on at SCF with Ben. We're working on the pathways through the youth league, through pathways to the regional managers. We want to ensure that there is structure where everybody is talking the same language, because that's what I have learned, no matter where I've been. And it's the IPL has showed me that. You've got, players from all around the world, coaches from all around the world, and there's only one language that we speak, and that language is cricket, regardless of what the accent is. So where you've grown up is not important. Your passion for the game is very important, but you really have to be honest with regards to putting cricket and the whole of Swedish cricket ahead of just yourself. So I think the similarities to places like Malawi, a lot of frustration, and I think hopefully we can rectify that here in Sweden, is that a lot of the people are doing great work, but in isolation and not sharing their knowledge, or people are going, well, man, why didn't you do that for us? So I think what we want to ensure that there is a pathway and an opportunity for players to put their hands up and say, hey, I'm putting in the work. Please recognize me. Please look at me. And we have that system which we are going to put in place. So those sort of structures, I don't see those in other associate member countries. And that excites me about what we're trying to do here with SCF.
Awesome, Jonty. One other question that's popped in here is the importance of quality over quantity. Would you say that quality is most important when it comes to fundamentals?
100%. If you had to even divide up the time that you're at practice, if there's 1 minute, if you practice one thing 100% for 1 minute, I would rather have that. I would rather have the quality over quantity any day of the week at every single practice session. So if it's a 5-minute practice or drill that you are doing and you get it 100% right, that for me is you're on the right path, as opposed to spend half an hour, 1 hour and you get it 70% right. I mean, if you're working towards getting somewhere, getting better, and you're making mistakes along the way, because mistakes are stepping stones to greater things. But if you're getting lazy and you're just getting tired and you're practicing for the sake of practice, give me quality any day.
Fantastic. Another one that's popped in just now is it? Do you think that it's possible for people over 30 to play high quality cricket as well? I think that's a pretty easy answer there.
Yeah, listen, I mean, yeah, I retired at age 34, not because I wasn't seeing the ball or, you know, I wasn't able to keep up with the younger players. So from that perspective, I think if you, and I think we, you know, you've seen it more and more, there's people don't have to be in a national team to have access to online training, to online coaching if they want. So yes, over the age of 30 is there's no stopping somebody if you're looking after yourself and you, as a game, if you're practicing. Because I mean, people who are in their 30s are probably working. I don't think there are too many professional cricket players in Sweden, probably not any. So all of us are working at day jobs and or at school. And you know, I think from that perspective, it doesn't mean, okay, because I've missed the boat now at age 20, am I done? No, if you're putting in the work and you're scoring runs, you're taking wickets, you're contributing, you're looking after yourself, age is no limit. Definitely not 30. I mean, I'm 52 this year. Yeah, okay, maybe not me.
Last two coming in, Jonty. How important is it for youngsters to grow into a national team, in your opinion?
Well, I think what's really important, Ben, is to make sure that there's integration, because, you know, succession plans are important in business. Succession plans are important in teams' performances as well, because, you know, I think we've seen with many sides who've dominated for a 6 or 7 year period. The Australian team, for example, they won 3 consecutive World Cups, and suddenly they lost 5 of their key players, and then the rest of the teams around the world had an opportunity to get in and start, you know, dominating. So I think to introduce young players into a system is important. But what is more important, though, Ben, is to have a culture and a system that firstly encourages and supports the young players, but secondly puts them on the right path to making them better players. Because you don't want young players coming into a toxic environment, because then they're going to be ruined for the rest of their career. So we want to make sure that the environment that we have with SCF is a healthy, nurturing, an opportunity for young players to reach their full potential. Yeah, then we need youngsters in there.
I'm going to steal this one for my own personal interest here, Jonty, but would you say that it's important also to train like fitness in the off season, to run, to sprint, to stretch, without going into too much detail? You know, what are you sort of trying to achieve by the time you come to match day?
Well, you know, Ben, you know, I was fortunate. I was a hockey player and a cricket player. So I grew up, there was no international sport in South Africa. So I had 6 months of field hockey and 6 months of cricket. So I would arrive the cricket season very fit. And being a young guy, as I said, the short webinar or webinar short, diving around the field was very easy, running for the ball because I was accustomed to, I was a football player, I was a tennis player, and also a hurdler and a long jumper, you know. So I had that opportunity to understand the fact that no matter how big I was, I could utilize all my power to create the strength, to get the throws in the right direction, to dive for the ball and land correctly. And all of that, you know, I would not have had half the success in my playing career if I wasn't given the opportunity to explore other sports. So yes, training is important. Yes, the physical side of it, the mental side of it is very important. But for me, it's more a case of the multi-sport approach. Because if you're just playing cricket, it's very much channel vision. You down one line, batting, bowling is the same. Play football, play hockey, field hockey, play ice hockey, play badminton, play tennis, play paddle. You know, all these sports create this peripheral vision and this awareness. And the awareness is the key for me, is that on the field and off the field, it makes you way more, you pick up whether your teammates are struggling, if you're struggling, you've now got other options to look at rather than just this tunnel vision. So yes, the physical training is important, but you can train by playing. And that's the key for me, is that it doesn't have to be a 6-day-a-week gym regime. It can be, or a training regime. You have to run 1,000 kilometers in a month. You can play sports that get you moving. Play football. play some tennis. Don't play ice hockey, because I've seen that. It looks a bit rough. You might not make it through the off season, but just play sport. Keep moving, keep active. Don't come from a position of, I've had 4 months sitting on the sofa at home, now I want to play. You also don't have to arrive all bulked up and have bigger pecs than Ben Harrody. That's not possible and not necessary. Okay, so it's not about a gym training regime. It's about movement. It's about understanding where your power comes from. Your power comes from the ground up. Think of a tennis player. When they're serving, they don't just stand there and hit. When you're throwing a cricket ball, you use everything. I'm a small guy, as I said. I could still throw powerfully because I threw from the ground up. Kohli hits the ball so well. AB de Villiers times the ball so sweetly, not because of their biceps, their shoulders, because they use the power from the ground up. So if your feet don't move, you're half the cricket player you should be. You're half the cricket player you should be if your feet don't move well. So that's the one thing that you can do in the off season. Plyometrics. Google it. Look at it. It's not complicated. It's explosive movement. It can be running through a ladder. It can be jumping onto boxes. It doesn't have to be in a gym. But if it gets your feet moving and makes you faster, gives you more awareness, you're already a better cricket player without even hitting a ball or bowling a ball. How's that for a incentive?
Fantastic. Jonty, thank you so much. Just in wrapping up, I wanted to mention to everyone that, or remind everyone that this is the first of 4 seminar shorts that are coming up between now and the start of February. All information has been sent out to every individual club. So please first ask your clubs to share that information with you, and you can go in and register just like you have for this event. Make sure you secure your spaces now. We have some very interesting topics coming up. Next week, we're discussing the mental game. Then we're following up with Jonty giving some specific fielding tips over 30 minutes, and trying to share his life in 30 minutes might be a trick. And then we'll be talking about some specific strength training and training where you are. So we'll be trying to run these seminar shorts as much as we possibly can with interesting topics. If you have any feedback on topics that you might find are interesting, please do share them with us via Facebook. But thank everyone so very much for participating tonight, and just leaving the last words to you, Jonty, if you wanted to round us off. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Ben, thanks for putting this together. I mean, I really am excited. It's like my first official